Hello, welcome to GeoBytes, your daily roundup of news from geospatial industry. I'm your host Bhanu Rekha. For the next 15 minutes, I will bring you the latest developments from products, projects, policies and businesses. But first, let's take a look at the top story today. Colorado-based United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket has launched the 10th GPS Block 2F satellite successfully. The 189-foot tall rocket has followed a 46-degree flight azimuth to replace a 19-year-old satellite in the GPS constellation. You're watching the satellite being encapsulated inside the rocket right now. The team at Cape Canaveral is relieved that the weather did not play a spoilsport because weather forecasters has predicted that there would only be a 70% chance of meeting the launch rules. The launch marks the 70th GPS satellite launch since 1978, the 15th to use an Atlas rocket and the 4th Block 2F on Atlas. Imagine you're walking towards your local bus stop and your phone suddenly beeps to tell you that your bus is delayed, but you can take an express. Or picture yourself standing in front of an exhibit at the museum while an app gives you background info about the art. All this and more can soon become a reality with Google launching Eddystone, a new set of technology products that can be used to build apps that provide engaging location-based and contextually relevant experiences. The technology is based on electronic beacons, which can be described as low-energy and battery-friendly hardware that use Bluetooth to transmit data. Apple is already into this market with its 2-year-old iBeacon. However, iBeacon works on a proprietary standard that works only with iDevices. Google's Eddystone is capable of working with any platform that supports Bluetooth Low Energy. This includes both Android and iOS devices. Eddystone is open source and can be integrated with other technologies like GPS and Wi-Fi. Let's hear more about the project from Google developer Timothy Jordan.
When you use Google together with your beacons, you get an open and flexible beacon standard called Eddystone, as well as APIs that allow you to register, manage, and detect beacons. Let's take a look at how all these components work together. Say you've got a great idea for using beacons to improve users' lives, a service that helps commuters with public transit. It's an app that detects bus stops and train stations and provides up-to-date information concerning their favorite routes at those stops. You'll first need some beacons, one for every stop and station. Several beacon types will work, but we recommend one that supports Eddystone, which is a new open format for beacons that anyone can use. It offers a common format to build upon and a means of extending it to include new features and use cases. And it does all of this in the open on GitHub under the Apache 2.0 license. Now, these beacons work with both Android and iOS and are already available from 6 manufacturers today. Once you get your hands on a beacon that supports the Eddystone standard, you'll need to provision it. And then, depending on your use case, you'll want to register it with a cloud service and attach data.
Google's blog post announcing this initiative was in fact flooded with comments in no time. Remy Vale said there is a lot of awesome potential for BLE and NFC. It's great to see Google creating a standard for everyone. I just hope Apple doesn't disable it somehow. Aaron Ogle said he's glad to see Google took their time and are doing it as an open standard. In another development, the New York Times is reporting that ride-hailing service Uber is now out of the running to acquire Here Maps. Uber was rumored to have bid $3 billion for the mapping unit. New York Times sources are saying that Nokia is favoring a consortium of German automakers, including BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz, for HERE maps. Earlier, Chinese tech giants Baidu and Tencent were also reported to be interested in acquiring HERE, but they have also been sidelined for the car makers. As Nokia spent over $8 billion to buy HERE from map provider Navteq in 2008, it is hoping to get at least $4 billion from its sale now. The National Association of Private Sector Geospatial Firms, MAPS, has announced the members of its board of directors for the year 2015 and 2016. Susan Marlowe, who is a certified GIS professional and a principal with Stantec's Nashville, Tennessee office, is the new president of the association. She succeeds Jeff Lower, who is the executive vice president of IIC Technologies. Marlowe says she will be focusing on welcoming more members into the MAPS umbrella while strengthening teamwork among the member firms. The vice president of Colorado's American company, Brian Reber, has assumed the position of president-elect and will succeed to the office of president next year. A new government management solutions company has been founded in New Jersey. Called GovPilot, the cloud-based platform delivers a suite of productivity, mobile and automation apps that are expected to improve the delivery of government services to citizens. One of the solutions that GovPilot provides is a proprietary GIS through which governments can easily perform spatial analysis. The platform is preloaded with numerous datasets like property assessment records and shapefiles such as FEMA flood maps, emergency service locations, and Google real-time traffic. Governments can geographically visualize data such as public complaints, health issues, and vacant properties in minutes on a digital parcel map. Emergency notification technology provider Global Star has announced that Lockheed Martin's flight service will provide automated position monitoring for flights following visual flight rules. Spot Gen 3's GPS tracking will help generate reports for flight services. The system will keep track of the aircraft at all times. If the aircraft stops moving or stops sending position reports, an alarm will be triggered immediately at Lockheed Martin Flight Service. The Spot Gen 3 also features the SOS button that can be sent an instant distress message along with GPS position information to initiate search and rescue operations. We will now slip into a short break, but when we return, we will take a look at what's happening in the Asia-Pacific region.
Once again, Trimble is leading the way in positioning technology with the new Trimble R8S GNSS receiver. An entirely new way to look at receiver possibilities. Simply choose the configuration and features you require today. Then, add features as you need them tomorrow. It's the ultimate in scalability. With this innovative receiver, you tailor your system to your job, to the way you work. Choose the level of configuration that suits your needs. As your requirements change, the Trimble R8S can adapt. You simply add functionality whenever you want it. Each Trimble R8S comes standard with integrated Maxwell 6 chips, Trimble 360 tracking technology, and more. All to keep you productive and expand the reach of your GNSS system. Plus, it offers our exclusive web UI for remote monitoring and the new Trimble DL Android app for GNSS data logging. And the Trimble R8S maximizes productivity by easily integrating with the Trimble S-Series total stations and our innovative V10 imaging rover. For ultimate field efficiency, combine the Trimble R8S receiver with a Trimble controller and the intuitive Trimble Access Field software. Trust Trimble Business Center to help you edit, process, and adjust your data. It's the kind of solution you have come to expect from Trimble. We've been setting the standard in positioning technology for more than 30 years. See how we're raising the bar again with the Trimble R8S GNSS receiver.
Welcome back. Topcon Positioning Group's technology is facilitating digital preservation of a Japanese heritage site. Topcon has mapped the historic Sogi hydroelectric plant in Japan as part of the SIARC 500 Challenge, an international project which aims to digitally preserve and create awareness of some of the world's most significant cultural heritage sites. The geospatial technologies used in the project includes Topcon's GLS 2000 scanner, the IPS-3 mobile mapping system, as well as aerial mapping solutions. SIARC archived the captured 3D data and used it to build an interactive online map of the site. A satellite developed jointly by China and Brazil has now become operational. The satellite called CBERS 4 was sent into orbit last year. Developed by Chinese Academy of Space Technology and the National Institution of Space Research from Brazil, the satellite can cover terrain the size of China in 26 days and provide images of medium resolution. Data from the satellite will be used for remote sensing applications like crop estimates and survey of geological disasters. African and Latin American countries will have free access to the data provided by the satellite. So far, CBERS 4 has taken more than 200,000 images of the Earth with its 4 cutting-edge cameras equipped with an infrared multispectral scanner and a wide-field imager. Last month, we told you how the Ahmedabad airport in India will become the first in the country to get the Ground-Based Augmentation System or GAGAN. Now, the country's Civil Aviation Minister Ashoka Gajapati Raju has inaugurated the GPS-aided system GAGAN, which will now offer seamless navigation to the aviation industry. GAGAN has been jointly developed by the Indian Space Research Organisation ISRO and the Airports Authority of India. The system has been completed in 15 years at a total cost of $125 million. India is the 4th country in the world to offer space-based satellite navigation services to the aviation sector. The guided approach landing with the help of GAGAN will benefit not 1 but 50 airports in the country. Other benefits include improved efficiency, direct routes, including fuel savings and approach with vertical guidance at runways. That's all we have for you in GeoBytes today. Find us on www.geobiz.com and follow GeoBiz on Twitter. We will be back shortly with GeoBiz exclusive. Stay tuned.
Geospatial industry is evolving with time, adding newer dimensions, converging with other technologies, and expanding across verticals. Feel the pulse of its growth story. Catch the technology innovators, system integrators, business drivers, and policymakers share their knowledge, experiences, and ideas at GeoBiz Leaders Summit. Join the knowledge pool.
Can you tell us a little bit about Geo and what it is that you do in the organization?
We have a lot of obviously formidable competitors in the mapping space.
But saying human geo, I was perplexed. Why the name human to the geospatial angle?
If we think about land, I mean, land is a key core to prosperity.
Thank you, Hugo, for speaking with GeoBiz and Geospatial World. Good morning, Mr. Rolando Ocampo. Thanks for coming over and welcome to GeoBiz. As a national mapping organization of Mexico, INEGI has been doing quite a lot of activities and services. Can you tell us what is the mandate of INEGI and what are the objectives with which it is working?
First, let me tell you that there are three things that characterize our institution. The first one is the autonomy of our institution. We have a complete autonomy from the government, and we only have to send information just to the Congress. And second one is that we have not only mapping, but also we have statistics in the same institution. Our institute is National Institute of Statistics and Geography. And the third one is that the mandate that the law gives us to create the National Statistics and Geography Information System. This is a very new element in our government, and I think it's a good practice in all the world because we have that mandate to create these systems and that involves all the government administration, federal administration, province or states of us, and municipalities to create this big system of statistics and geography.
It's pretty unique that INEGI has both statistics and geo-information together in one organization, and I feel it is a big advantage. So how is INEGI utilizing this advantage?
Let me tell you that, as I know, Brazil has the same, but only Brazil and Mexico. Yeah. And the way that we use it is, let me give you some information. With this, we have to create these 4 subsystems: one for economic information, one for demographic information, one for government and security information, and another one for geography and environmental information. In that subsystems, we sit to the table the most important technicians and the most important decision makers of that areas, and to bring them into the table just to create standards, to create this system, and to give the information in one only recipient. That's the way it allows us to have a lot of contact with the government to obtain and to give support in the same platform and with the statistics information, with mapping information, with environmental information to the whole units of the state in Mexico.
You mean to say in all the subsystems you talked about, there is a combination of statistical information and geo-information together, and map products are done based on that?
Exactly. 2 or 3 examples. First one, we for the statistic side, we made in the economic area, we make our economic census every 5 years. it's easier for the statisticians to have the questionnaire, go to the field, obtain the information, and produce Excel tapes. So sheets well, what we do with the integration of the two, the statistics and geography, so we georeference all that information. We give them the roads, we give them the maps, we give them all the information, geographical information, and we give them some tablets just to georeference all the economic units, to take some photos of them, and we put it in the map and we put it in the web. So we have almost 5 million economic units from the whole country, all of them georeferenced. They have, you click one, so you can identify the name of the company, the address of the company, an aggregation number of employees of each one. If they have internet, so you're going to have the link of internet, and even you can add some information if you want. You are the owner of that company, you can add information. For example, a restaurant, you can add the menu or something like that. This is the way we do it. In the population census, we made the same. We georeference all the information into a block. So we can know, if you click the information in one block, you can know how many houses are, how many, the distribution of age or gender, or if they have pavement roads, if they have a lot of information from the realities, and even if they have water, if they have a train, if they have light, all of that information. If they are Catholics, how many the percentage of Catholics in that area or something like that. So you have all the information into a block, and that you can use it for planning. Mm-hmm. And another thing which is very important for us is that we understand that our business is not to sell information. Mm-hmm. Our business is to produce, and that all the people use that information. Mm-hmm. So all of our information is free of charge, and even it's public, and even it's in June, we are going to have all the information in an open data system.
That's a great initiative to have all your data in an open data format system. So what are the objectives with which you moved into this framework of open data, and how do you see this opening up the governance?
Even the maps, we have an issue that it's called GeoMaps, so that you can obtain all the maps from a PDF or format or something you can download with all the attributes that the map must contain. And the idea is that what we want is that everybody can use that information. So we put it in our website, and we give it so everybody can download that information, because we understand that everybody and most of the municipalities, private sector, need that information, need the information just to make plans, to planning, to make routing and whatever. So this is our mandate, that we obtain our budget from the Congress. So everybody in Mexico pay taxes. So that's the reason that our information belongs to them.
It's very wonderful, and in this case of INEGI, that the influence or the value of the maps and the statistical information together for the public and for the economic development of the country is very directly related and established. Has there been any study to quantify the impact of maps and it is contributing to the economy of the country?
No, we haven't done that exercise. I think we must do it, because I think in the last years, the geographic information is going up. Mm-hmm. and in particular in our institution, that we are producing that information in the statistics sides and the economic side and even the geographical side, but we haven't done that. We are more focusing in produce and to let them people use it, and to have more initiatives just to let the people understand how to use it.
So when you say you're making people understand how to make use of the maps, are you also trying to create some applications and create awareness to use the maps and applications?
Yes, even we have some apps. One for the economic information, the NUE, and we have another geographical apps. And the answer is yes. And this is in addition, we have a lot of capacity training, and we go to the universities, we work with the private sectors. We have a lot of training courses where we present our information. We give them the tools. We develop a software in an open source that we call it Digital Map of Mexico, where you have more than 200 layers of information by the geographical and the statistics sides, all the hydrological, roads, economic information, security information, whatever, all you have in that layer, so you can use it for risk, for planning, for everything.
Also, I see that INEGI is playing quite a proactive role in developing the spatial data infrastructures of the region. You've been very actively collaborating with UNGGIM as well, and have set up the UNGGIM for the Americas. Can you share the role of INEGI in these activities?
Statistical and geographical institution that the Congress gave us that mandate in Mexico. We are the representatives of our country for that to science. And in the United Nations, this new initiative, the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management. So I'm the president of UNGGIM Americas. We are leading this initiative in the continent. And the idea is to join all the countries and to have common information, to share standards, to share information, to create a world global map for sustainable development, to adopt these new standards, and to coordinate ourselves into the geographical and statistical information. That's the issue. Well, we have a mandate for the global organization of UNGGIM. Mexico is one of the co-chairs, and in particular myself, I'm president of the initiative in the Americas.
As part of this, you also developed the geostatistical framework as well, right? Can you share more information about it?
As an organization that has the two science together, the geography and the statistics, it's easy for us just to put on the table how do we use the two, and how we have developed standards and even information and tools and softwares on how to coordinate that. In the countries, the geographical side and the statistical side, they don't talk each other. Yeah. So in most of them, all the statistics office has a geographical information office. And the geographicals have to be more for the geodetic, for the geological and the geographical issues. And the statistics use the maps just to incorporate the information, but they don't mix them. And this is what we have done since last 32 years. So we have some experience. We are a good practice, I think, in all over the world. So the United Nations asked us to be part of this working group, and to share this working group with Australia, and so that's what we are doing. Even we have had some special meetings just and we invite countries just to coordinate these efforts, talking about which is the best way to put the statistical information in a grid or in geographical areas or statistical framework, something like that's what we have discussing.
I just want to understand, because INEHI is producing a lot of thematic data as well, and first and foremost being the cadastre. So how is this the recent cadastre modernization program you have done? Can you share more about it?
First, in Mexico, we have two different kinds of land: private land and the social land. For the social land, in 1994, we began a project that we called it Procede, and where we went to the field just to measure all the social land, which is about 52% of the country. So we just made that cadastral information. We went to the field, we produced that information, and when we finish that, we, as a technicians at the institution, we give that information for another organization of the government, which is called National Agrarian Register. And they have all that information, and we have the techniques of how to produce it, and this is for the social land. For the urban land, we have an agreement with in Mexico. All the cadastral information comes from the municipalities, and we have some agreements with the government, the social development minister, and the states, just to join all the information in one cadastre base in 2012. So we have that information, and we are beginning to update it and to modernize. We made agreements with a bank, a developing bank in Mexico, which is called Banobras, National Bank of Municipality and State Development. And we go to the municipalities, we make a diagnosis, and we tell them, well, you have to improve this and this and this and this in your cadastral system. And the bank give them some money just to modernize it. So after that, we certify that they did it, and so they modernize it. So this is the way that we are helping with this cadastre. Even in the last year, there was a change in the constitution about this area for the modernizing and of the cadastral and register in all the country, and they are beginning to have the new law that is going to coordinate this process, and then now it's in the Senate, the law.
In that sense, the direct relationship between your activities and the governance is fairly established. And moving forward, what are any new initiatives that INEHI is planning? How is it reinventing itself to be more relevant for the changing needs of the government and the people?
When we obtained our autonomy, was in 2008, our main objective was to create this national statistics and geographical information system. And we did it. We create 37 specialized technical committees that are in 4 subsystems that I mentioned, and we have one technical specialized committee in each state. We have 31 states, and the Mexico City is the 32. And the idea for us is that we have this national, we want to go to the states to create this state information, statistics and geographical information. So we have everything in the national. We are just cutting the information just to give to to the States so they can be able to use it for all the planet. They come to us and it's a little bit different from the all countries. In Mexico, our institute, all the states go with us and ask us for the information, and even if they want to do something, they ask us to do it in terms of statistics and geographical information and environmental of that information. Just produce information, not planning, not take decisions, not everything. This is not our job. And that's why in the future, what I would like, what I think that we must push more is in this state development and systems.
Thank you so much. It is very nice understanding the activities of INEHI and the visionary plans of INEHI as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about GEO and what it is that you do in the organization?
We have a lot of obviously formidable competitors in the mapping space.
But saying human geo, I was like perplexed. Why the name human to the geospatial angle?
If we think about land, I mean, land is a key core to prosperity.
Thank you, Hugo, for speaking with GeoBiz and Geospatial World. Definitely, you seem to have a very very focused right from your academics or later the positions that you have held in government and otherwise, all related to space and policy. What, according to you, what is the significance of you? What is that is really passionate about space for you, and how important is it for a country like the United States?
Well, I think the thing that's probably most important about space or space policy is there is this image, of course, of space as the frontier. And of course, America is a frontier country, has that image of itself. And so if we look at space as a new frontier, the question is not just what technologies go on that frontier, what scientific exploration do we do on that frontier, but how do people live and work and trade and carry out their lives. And so to me, the exciting thing about space is this is another area for the extension of values that maybe we hold dear, whether it be a democratic system, a liberal or pluralistic culture, having a mixed economy, market-driven economy. So space is an area not just of technology, but really of what values we'll be taking into the future. So I think that's kind of like the larger image about why some of these issues are very exciting, because they do represent a positive view of the future.
So in a way, you see it is becoming a cultural paradigm for people in a country, right?
That's right. It has a lot to do with their sort of self-image and what do they think of themselves? Do they think of themselves as an exploring people? Do they think of themselves as adventurous and innovative and creating new things? So space has important symbolic aspects as well as economic and security aspects. There's a symbolism of space that's always been there, of course, since the earliest days.
Okay, when you talked about exploration, definitely United States is one country who has been an early entrant into the space domain and has really maintained its leading position for many years. But slowly it looks like it is taking a different approach now, because earlier it used to be Moon as the primary space exploration target, but now it's slowly moving into the Mars and the asteroid space and all that. Are the priorities of United States changing with the changing time, is it?
Well,
in terms of exploration?
Well, I think one of the things you have to recognize is, first of all, space has been international from the beginning. Of course, it was the Soviet Union that had the first satellite and had the first man in space, not the United States. But that space today is much more of a global enterprise. So the United States, Russia, China, Europe, Japan, India, increasingly many countries are involved in space. So it's simply a much more crowded domain than it once was, a much more globalized domain than it once was. So in looking at exploration going forward, I think that the days of a single country doing something in isolation are largely gone. Even most scientific experiments today, of course, have multinational participation.
For example, the International Space Station.
Well, the International Space Station is probably the best example of international cooperation, an incredibly complex project, as large and as long and as difficult as anything that anybody has ever done. And it's been done, of course, completely as an international cooperative effort. So space in the future, I think we'll see more international cooperative activities. One thing I would say, your point about Mars and asteroids, one of the difficulties with Mars and asteroid missions is that because they are so challenging and difficult, that actually there are fewer opportunities for international participation. So I've actually been more of an advocate of a return to the moon as a part of an international consortium rather than Mars. Mars is a wonderful longer-term goal. I think we will get there. But I think the next step beyond low Earth orbit, beyond the space station, will probably be the moon, because that's something we can and should do with partners.
Why do you say that the United States should return to moon?
Well, because it's something that we really haven't finished exploring it. If you look at all the areas of the moon that we have landed on and explored, it's less than the area of the mall in downtown Washington. So it's like saying we landed on the Washington Mall and we've explored the United States. That's simply not true. And there are potential resources on the moon, potential for water ice on the South Poles, for example, that could make in-space operations cheaper and easier. And it's also something that we can do with other countries. So we may have been to the moon, but many other countries have not. Yeah. And so as a partnership opportunity, as an economic development opportunity, as an area of continued scientific interest, I think the moon is probably the logical next step for us.
Do you also see moon to be a future colony for the Earth?
We don't know. And as an academic, I'll answer it with more questions, which is that it depends on whether there's something we can do to earn our way. Is there something commercial to be done there? And can we live off the land? Can we use those local resources? If we can do both those things, if there's something economic to do and we can use local resources, then I think there will be a settlement there. If it turns out that we can live there, but there really isn't anything economic to do, then maybe the moon will be more like Antarctica, where we'll have a scientific base, there may even be tourists, but it won't really be a sustaining settlement the way we think of them.
True, but I see that NASA's budgets are consistently declining. So is it really a shift in NASA's thinking, or is it something that can sustain its United States position as the leader or a frontier in the space capabilities?
Well, I think first of all is space is not synonymous with NASA. I mean, space is literally larger than NASA. And of course we have a large national security apparatus. We also have a growing commercial industry. We've had industry, of course, involved in space since the very first days, but an increasingly entrepreneurial and innovative industry is there. So I think when you look at all those sectors, you see increasing US space capability. The NASA budget has, in real dollar terms, certainly declined, not only from where it was in the 60s, but even from where it was, say, at the end of the Cold War. On the other hand, the NASA budget, by and large, has been relatively stable. Support in the Congress has been stable. So while it's not at the level that I would wish it to be, it also represents a considerable amount of funds and resources that could be used depending on how efficiently you use those resources. So I think that the growth of commercial industry and the growth of international partnerships are both things that could be in combination with existing resources. We can do some remarkable things if we wish to.
Yeah, I think you're bang on the point when you said there is a growth of commercial industry around space, and especially the small satellite space. I see a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of activity happening in that space. What is your insight into this mushrooming space? Where is it leading, and is the government in a position at this point in time to really create a conducive environment for that growth?
Well, I think the government has actually not been the main driver for that in the near term. The driver for a lot of some of the small satellites, particularly the small remote sensing constellations, to my mind, have really been really big data. Companies like Google and others who are looking at bringing in more and more real-time data, more timely data, as well as higher resolution data with different sensors on it. So the small sat business and the growth that's happened there has been the result of new demand coming to that market, not the result of new government demand, but new really private sector demand for the information that these satellite constellations can generate. So that's been where there's been a blending of the geospatial community interests and the space community interests. As you've probably talked about in other sessions, there are multiple different platforms for which geospatial data is acquired, not only space, but of course unmanned air vehicles, regular aircraft, ground-based sensors, and so forth. And that proliferation of data sources has also, of course, come into the small satellite business. So I see the small satellite business as being intrinsically linked to the future health and well-being of the geospatial industry.
Okay, so definitely the bearing of the growth in the small satellite industry has a direct bearing on how the application-wise the data is used and other things. But is there a policy framework in using regulating the manufacturing and launching, and also the downstream data downlink and the use of the data as well?
Right. Well, a particularly unique point for the U.S. is we don't regulate the data and the information. Other countries, of course, do regulate more of the downstream side of it. The U.S. tends to focus its regulation at the source, at the satellite level, rather than the data that comes from it. One of the things that's happened is that there's been a realization that the existing regulatory structures we have that were created in the early 90s, actually I was at the Commerce Department in the early 90s when we did this, was created for technologies and architectures that are still important, are still there, but they've been joined by these new small satellite systems, things and constellations and sizes that we really didn't envision back then. So I think what you'll see in the U.S. is a need to update the domestic regulations we have for commercial remote sensing systems because they are increasingly hard-pressed to respond to the rate of innovation that's been coming forward. I think those regulations worked well in the early days. I think they worked well for a couple decades. But I think the technologies and market changes you're seeing now mean that those regulatory structures are increasingly under stress. They just really have a hard time keeping up with the innovation that's coming from the private sector. And we want them to keep up because we want people to do business in the United States. We want them to come here. We think it's good for innovation. It's good for the United States. So we need to adapt to these new realities. Otherwise, that will go overseas. It will go someplace else. And I would like to think that the U.S. can be the most attractive place for doing business, and at least I would hope so.
Okay. When you say about the regulation to enable the commercial Earth observation systems, you're talking in terms of the data regulations, or because I see that in a recent testimony to House Committee on Science, Space and Technology Subcommittee of Environment, you said that the private firms which are actually creating a lot of data, and with this commercial Earth observation systems, they at best can complement government capabilities. Can you tell me what exactly you mean by this? How do you see these being complementing to the existing government capacities?
Sure. Well, a classic example of that is we have existing weather satellite systems And there have been debates about whether we should privatize those systems. In general, the political process and the White House and Congress has said, no, those satellites are really so important for public safety that we don't really feel comfortable privatizing them. However, we do see that there are new sources of private data, GPS radio occultation measurements, for example, that measure changes as GPS signals go through the Earth's atmosphere, can provide great increases to the accuracy of weather predictions. And there have been scientific demonstration programs. The Taiwanese COSMIC program that's done in conjunction with the National Center for Atmospheric Research has demonstrated these radio occultation measurements and how they can contribute. And there are private firms that are now willing to step forward with small satellites to provide this kind of data on a commercial basis so that the government doesn't have to outlay that funding itself. That is, they can simply buy the data from a commercial provider. So it certainly controls and lowers the risks. It complements the data that comes from the weather satellite systems. And so this is an area where innovation in the private sector and small satellites is creating a new product that goes on top of and complementary with government satellite programs to produce a better capability than either one alone could do.
Okay. One of the other aspects that you pointed out in your testimony is about the shift in the agency's mindset that is required in terms of both their financial and human capital. Are the government agencies at this point in time even have those capacities to handle this kind of data and the innovation that is happening in the private space, or what is the need that need to be that they need to scale up?
Sure. In the NASA experience, roughly 85 cents out of every dollar NASA had went out to the industry. So it's not as if a lot of this was kept inside. I mean, industry has always been the primary performer of these activities. But what we would always do is making sure there is in-house intellectual capacities so the government could be a good overseer, a good manager, a good contract manager. And the way you did that is not by simply reading papers and reports. You actually had to have people who were experienced building satellites. So within the science community, for example, within NASA field centers, you always made sure there was at least one, maybe two missions that were being built in-house. So even if 85 cents out of every dollar was going out to industry, you always made sure that the government had certain capacities in-house. And it was that balance. In order to be a good steward of the taxpayer dollar, you wanted the government people to be smart, to be experienced, so that they would get the most benefit out of the industry, who really would always do the bulk of the work. And so there's that balance between what is it I want government to do and need to do, and really where are the efficiencies and sources of innovation, which are often really in the private sector.
Okay, definitely the innovation is quite a bit happening in the private sector, and we see that there's really a proliferation of geospatial data and more so the big data kind of a thing. So and moreover, I see that the remote sensing image industry is not about is just about selling pretty pictures, but creating a lot of value-added services and value-added products out of the images. So where is this, where you see this industry moving, how it is becoming more and more a common person's utility, something that empowers each and every individual? Would you like to cite certain examples on this, and how the policy environment need to change in accordance with this kind of changes?
Well, I mean, certainly people's experience with their cell phones, their iPhones, and the mapping location-based services that we increasingly rely on every day. That's certainly in most people's common experience with some geospatial data, finding maps online and so forth. We become very, very used to this sort of thing. But what's the policy challenge, I think, coming up is that there are uses of geospatial data that are not so visible to people. More and more people these days are sort of like wearing personal fitness devices, and they're monitoring themselves, and there are devices that go on your automobile that track how much you use your automobile and for insurance purposes. And there is as geospatial data becomes more and more embedded in applications, I think a policy question that is going to come up is, when do the rights of the individual and the consumer to privacy and to controlling information about themselves as they start to conflict with the commercial imperatives to collect more data in order to make a profit. And so insurance companies certainly want more data about you. Healthcare companies want more data about you. What's that balance of power between what you control about yourself, what they know about you, who mediates that sort of trade? And I don't think we really know what that balance really ought to be.
Has there been any debate in terms of what the insurance company, for example, needs and the privacy concerns of an individual? Is there any debate and any thinking happening with it?
It is still very new. It is still very new. It is still very much an area of sort of cutting edge law. You see things like debates in Europe over Google. The right to be forgotten, for example. You see debates over who is it that sets these privacy regulations, what role the governments have, what role industry sorts of have. The US and Europe have taken slightly different approaches to that. I think we have a more open and innovative market in the US. I think the Europeans, however, have taken a more cautious and conservative approach to protecting individual privacies. And I think it's too early to say that one is obviously right versus the other. But this is because this data is globalized and because the market is incredibly globalized. These somewhat local debates within Europe, the United States, and other countries will have an impact on the future of the industry. And it's not an industry to industry question, it's really going to be an industry to consumer question. Who does the consumer trust? Do they trust the companies to protect and manage their data in a way? Do they trust and rely upon governments to do that? Or do they trust neither and seek to maybe encrypt more of that data and set themselves off and apart from what information government can gather about them or what information companies can gather about them? What level of comfort do we have with that kind of knowledge?
I think it's pretty much a subjective issue. It's
very subjective. It's very subjective. Younger people will give up information about themselves readily online that maybe their older parents would be very uncomfortable with doing. So it's an area where the social norms are also evolving.
Okay, but as you see the social norms evolving, but it is also not just a cultural shift, but individual choices over a period of time, or a group of individual choices make a national, sometimes a national security issue as well.
Right.
So is there a way to deal with these nuances, both protecting the individual privacy, also at the same time not at the cost of nation's security aspects?
I think one of the things we'll start to see more of is sort of more experimentation. You'll start to see companies maybe competing on to what degree can they provide levels of trust or assurance to their customers. I think you see this most recently. Apple, for example, looking at encrypting more of its communications.
True.
Facebook paying more attention to privacy, the sorts of issues. This is an ongoing dialogue that's happening between the companies and their customers. And it's this issue of trust. I think a lot of times when we get involved in information technology debates or high technology debates, we're very enamored of the technology and we're very enamored of the skill it takes to create the technology and use it. But what is often missed is that at the end of the day, it's really the trust that people have in that. Do you trust this web browser? Do you trust this cell phone system? Do you trust this map? And that trust can, if it's lost, very, very hard to overcome. And so while the focus is on technology, at the end of the day, it's that human emotion of trust that tends to be probably the most valuable thing that companies can try to cultivate, and frankly, governments need to cultivate if either of them is to have a legitimacy.
Okay, you were talking about trust and how important it is to have a trust on a particular technology. Many a times we see that geospatial data providers, whether it is the government or whether it is a commercial established, they do provide the data, and on top of it, a user or a government organization or a consumer, for that matter, may develop an application and create something that is usable. But if there is, God forbid, there is any chance of a mishap or something happens, who is the person to be blamed? Is it the person who has developed an application? How do we really, what is the, where do we pinpoint who is to be blamed, kind of a thing? Is there still a gray area for use of geospatial data? How do we take this debate forward?
Yeah, well, the questions, of course, of liability. In many ways, I think it's been to the U.S. advantage to not try to answer all of those questions right up front, because we've been able to be more innovative as a result. I think in other cultures where there's been more of that focus on who's to blame if something goes wrong, that tends to chill innovation and tends to slow it down. Doesn't mean these issues aren't important and aren't real, but you can spend so much time worrying about that you really fail to make progress in the first place. I think one of the things that really governments will have to focus on is, can they be trusted to do their basic protective jobs? That is, if consumers are exploited, do they step in? If there's interference to, say, remote sensing systems, or for example, GPS, which is so crucial, and as you've probably seen, I've spent a lot of my time worrying about interference to GPS signals and in a much more congested spectrum environment. Can we trust our regulators to protect that signal? I think there's a sense of, while the relationship between the consumer and industry is still going to be continually evolving, there will be a necessity of governments to make sure they do their basic jobs first. Are the courts acting in a fair and transparent manner? Is the spectrum being protected? Are there fair trade rules that are being enforced? So the basic utilities, if you will, of government need to be functioning, while at the same time all this innovation is rapidly happening on top of it. And as I said, in the case of commercial remote sensing licenses, we recognize the need to sort of catch up and adapt our regulations to deal with that. So where that frontier is always going to be a tricky one. If you try to plan things out too specifically, you maybe never make progress. If you fall behind, you find yourself being left behind other competitors. So there isn't a single answer, there's really a dynamic one as that frontier moves forward.
Okay, that's a nice closing remark from you. The frontier keeps moving depending upon the innovation, and it's always, I think, good to move in sync with the latest developments across. Thank you so much, Dr. Pace, for joining us on the GeoBiz and sharing your insight.
Thank you.